Well, it's been almost a full day behind bars for former President Jacob Zuma. Many organizations and political parties have welcomed his imprisonment after he repeatedly defied the courts. Zuma, of course, is in the Estcourt Correctional Centre for quarantine purposes right now. He's expected to serve at least a quarter of his 15-month sentence with the possibility of parole in about 3 or 4 months. For more on this, I'm joined by Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana, a political analyst, Ike Moroe, an ANC NEC member and veteran of the party, and Melusi Xulu, an attorney, all to discuss exactly what's going to happen next. So, Ike Moroe, I'll start with you, of course, because I spoke to Pule Mabe and the ANC about how they felt to see one of their own struggle veterans behind bars. How do you feel, given that you are one of those struggle veterans?
Well, first and foremost, one has got to correct, this error. I am not an NEC member. I'm
Apologies.
a veteran of the ANC. I used to be an NEC member of the Xulu National Council, MK National Council. One must say this is a very difficult moment for Comrade Zuma, his family, and it should be for the entire movement. We need to ask ourselves, how did we come, to this place where one of us who has been a leader, has scored a first that is not about the best first. The first to be imprisoned for having violated or transgressed, the dictates of the Constitution and that of the Constitutional Court. As the ANC, one would think that we would need, to have a very, a deep reflection, some sort of introspection as to why did we allow ourselves to come to this place where the Constitution that we fought for and its institutions, have been tested up to a point where we find the former president of the country and of the ANC, languishing in prison for having shown contempt, against the Constitutional Court. Mm. It's a painful reality that, we are experiencing at this point in time, especially as veterans of the ANC.
Mcebisi, let me bring you in, and I want to move away from, the generic talk about Jacob Zuma being in jail right now. What does it mean for the image of our country to have a former president behind bars? Let's try and look at it that way.
Well, I think most importantly, it shows that our state institutions are fully functional. To have a former president sent to prison is nothing new. It has happened in many countries, including in the United States, Brazil, and France. Just recently, I think, Sarkozy, might have been sentenced or something like that. So it's not unusual to have someone who was quite prominent sent to prison. In fact, it's something to be celebrated because it shows that the laws apply blindly. They don't really discriminate. If you have breached the law, you are sent to prison. And so I know generally people think that, this is embarrassing, it attracts bad attention. But the point is humanity comes in different shades. There are people who abide by the law. There are people when they've erred, they correct their ways. There are people who show contrition when they are called to. But there are others who simply defy and think that they are above the law. And so humanity comes in all those different shades. But what matters is that if you call yourself a democratic society, you must live by those rules. So in the case of South Africa, it's an affirmation that we are a fully vibrant democratic society that is guided by the Constitution.
Mm. Melusi, this is not the end of the road, of course, for Jacob Zuma. We are expecting him to still face the fraud and corruption case. He's also gone to the High Court in Pietermaritzburg, and he'll go to the Constitutional Court again next week. Let's start with what's going to happen on Friday, which is tomorrow. We are going to hear at 9:30, I think it was, from the High Court in Pietermaritzburg about its decision. Is that null and void now, because he's already in jail anyway?
Okay. I believe the judgment will be at 11:30, but to answer your question, I don't think it's still null and void, because what he's applied for is a stay of execution so that the police don't execute what was stated by the order in the Constitutional Court. But now, let's say it's suspended, because let's look at what will happen Monday. Monday, it's possible that we will not get a judgment. So at least he might want that if the court agrees with him tomorrow, he's released, so that whilst he's waiting for the court to finalize the rescission application, he'll be outside so that he can see if the court will agree with him or not. So I don't think it's suspended. That's why the judgment is continuing at 11:30, so that if the judge agrees, he can release. But if he doesn't agree, then you'll have to wait for Monday's proceedings and see what will be decided at the end.
Mr. Moroe, you were talking about, it's not nice seeing a struggle veteran ending up behind bars, but obviously, many people are arguing that Jacob Zuma was one of the people who fought for a constitutional democracy and has to abide by the rules that he fought for so hard. If you look at the ANC's image overall, it's been pretty tarnished from everything that Jacob Zuma did in the 9 years that he was president, and then now obviously challenging the independence of the judiciary and the ANC's lead structures right now. What does this mean for the ANC, everything that's happened around this one individual?
That's why one said, when I started, that is a very difficult moment for the ANC. It means that the ANC should make an introspection as to where did it go wrong. If we're just an ordinary organization, if we did not pride ourselves, as having been at the forefront of the fighting for the principles that underpin, this constitution, mobilizing, for the adoption of this constitution, it would have been, easier for us to say that, democracy is vibrant. Therefore, presidents, should perhaps follow the constitution and go to prison. That's not how we would look at it, as far as myself being a member of the ANC is concerned. From the killers of the ANC, one would expect, a very high level of revolutionary morality, a very strict adherence to the constitution that we fought for. It is true indeed that many things have happened that still have got to be tested in court. That really, should they be proved to have been, to have really happened, under the leadership of Jacob Zuma. Yeah, it means that the ANC has, absorbed some very serious blows, and that's why one says that it is time for the ANC to make a deeper introspection. Ask ourselves, how did you get to this position, where we are looked upon as an ordinary, organization? Not that principled, liberation movement led by Oliver Tambo, led by Mandela, led by Luthuli, which fought for nothing else but to bring about, a better change in this country. So yes, indeed, a lot of things have happened. They're all painful, and they should wake up the ANC from the slumber. That we must set up and say, where did we go wrong? How did we allow the movement of the people to find itself in this position where it is currently? Yes, we've absorbed a lot. Thank you.
Mcebisi, you agree with those sentiments? Revolutionary morality, wake up from the slumber that we've seen happen. Is that going to happen in the ANC anytime soon? Because it's been happening for a long time. They haven't woken up, it seems.
Well, they are beginning to wake up. I think in the last 6 months or so to 8 months, I think a lot has been happening within the ANC. For a while, the ANC never really cared to apply its own rules. It got into this ritual of passing resolutions and coming up with rules and making huge announcements. And yet when it came to acting on those rules, they wouldn't do that, especially in instances where people were found wanting in terms of their behavior. Jacob Zuma included. I mean, he led right from the front when it came to misconduct. And the ANC didn't really punish him. And even now, the NEC said people must go to the commission, they must abide by whatever the commission says. He just ignored all of that. And the ANC has never acted. But on the other side, there is some movement. There is something emerging. People like Kalniels, for instance, now has just been suspended, Ike Moroe. So the idea of people found wanting on misconduct being suspended is beginning to gain ground. So what needs to happen, though, you need to do a lot more of that. Whenever there is wrongdoing that emerges, you need to act immediately so that you entrench that practice. You make it habitual, it becomes second nature, it becomes tradition. And so that ordinary ANC members can see that things have changed. The reason with the ANC most of the time is that when there is something wrong happening, they spend most of the time debating, trying to excuse your misbehavior and all sorts of things. Yes, you're quite right. Things have been, it's been free for all for quite some time. A lot of pretense, a lot of rhetoric. But I think in the last 6 months or so, 8 months, things are beginning to change. And of course, for the sake of the ANC, one hopes that change is sustained. And it's still going to be tested, Shahan. It's still going to be tested. The Zonal Commission is going to release its reports. There's going to be even more investigations. Who knows? More prominent leaders are going to be prosecuted. And it will remain to be seen whether the ANC acts steadfastly in defense of the law, because it's going to be called upon to defend the law repeatedly going forward, mainly because it has allowed its leaders previously in the last 10 years to engage in corruption. Corruption was a subculture in the ANC. It became fashionable. If you did not steal, you were a fool. In fact, you were a threat to others. They would kick you out. Temba Maseko tells us that he lost his job because he was one of the few honest ones. And so because corruption was allowed to thrive, you are going to have a lot of investigation because quite a number of them have been involved in corruption.
All right, Melusi, I'm going to end with you. And of course, the rescission application at the Constitutional Court on Monday is being heard. Jacob Zuma is hoping to get out of jail. And, what exactly are the aspects of this Constitutional Court application? And try to differentiate between whether it can be seen as an appeal or not.
Okay. First of all, it's not an appeal. It's an application by the applicant so that the court order is varied or rescinded based on the fact that there might have been some ambiguity or some error, or it was done in his absence, or maybe there's a common mistake. But what he's applying for, one of the things that I looked at that was interesting was that he's saying that he did not have a benefit of a trial. So I think it's going to be interesting, Shahan, here. So we're going to see how the court interprets what a trial is, because for most of us who do criminal law, our expectation is, according to Section 35 of the Constitution, Section 3, subsection 3. One of the rights there is that you have a fair trial. You have a situation where you are also present, evidence is adduced, and you can be able to challenge it. And what I'm interested in is paragraph O, where it talks about the right to appeal or review to the highest court. But what we see here, instead of the Commission's Act being applied, the Commission of Inquiry went straight to the apex court. Now, he doesn't have a right to appeal at that point. And that is constitutional right as well. That is why I said last time, Shahan, we shouldn't look at this as a Zuma situation, but as a situation where the rights to a fair trial must apply to an accused. And I'm of the view, from a legal point of view, that I don't think it was done in line with the Constitution. And I'll say why. If you look at the acting constitutional judge, she said the matter is self-evidently extraordinary. It is thus in the interest of justice to depart from the ordinary procedures. Now, I am asking, it's a rhetorical question. That ordinary procedure, is it in line with the constitutional supremacy? Is it in line with the Section 35 that talks about the rights to a fair trial? Is it in line with making sure that even when the sentencing is done in a manner where there is dignity that is applied to the accused? Because just to end, I don't want to take long. If you look at a case that I once mentioned again, as versus in 1969, at page 540, it talks about looking also at the personal circumstances of the accused. So if you got a man who's 79 years old in a matter that could be suspended and giving him 15 months, what is the purpose? Because by saying just because he's a former president, he must be given the most severe punishment, we are departing from our constitutional supremacy. So this case is going to be interesting for the future, and I'm willing to look at what the court will decide. But let's leave it in the hands of the court. But let's hope that this time the constitutional supremacy will be applied in the way that we are understanding it to be applied.
All right, that's an interesting point, but of course, ultimately, it is up to the Constitutional Court justices to make that decision. Thank you all so much for your time. We appreciate it. That was